Well, welcome everyone to the Rabbi and the Shrink. I'm Dr. Margarita Guri, Dr. Red Shoe, and this is
Rabbi Yonason Goldson.
And we have the most amazing guest today, and all our guests are amazing, but Libby Gill. She is a brand strategist with something that is very rare these days. She has clarity. And when she says something, you actually understand it. She's been hired from all the way from Disney to Dr. Phil, and she's amazing. So we thought she'd be the greatest one here to help us with the idea of clarity and hope. Her area is hope. Libby Gill, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We're delighted to have you. Tell us, what is your message that you want to share with the Rabbi and the Shrink audience with regard to hope?
Yet there's a science of hopefulness. People assume that hope is this very abstract, airy sort of thing. But there's a body of research and science that tells us that hope is a belief that change is possible and a conviction that you drive the outcome. You yourself personally, it is not other people, it is not your spouse, it is not your boss, it is not the government, but that you are the one that drives your future.
So why is it so few people seem to grasp that in difficult times? What happens to us?
We give into our lesser nature. I think anxiety takes hold, and we are human beings. We are animals. We forget that, and we are hardwired to let our defenses, our natural physiological defenses, do what they do and provide that early warning system. So we just go into the fight, flight, or the one most people forget, which is freeze. And we either stay stuck where we are, or we move inward, and it can become anything, as you well know, from depression and hurt and grief about just the losses that we've all gone through, or it becomes outward in terms of anger and incivility and all of those things that you were referencing that have caused all these conversations going awry instead of people sitting down and having an open and honest talk with one another.
Well, so we're hitting some interesting times. It's like stop, start. Are we pushing play with COVID or not? And certainly people's resilience has been worn away. So what are some signs of chronic hopefulness?
Chronic hopefulness?
Yes.
I think the ability to find that inner well of resilience and say, it's been, the edges are frayed, no doubt, but to say this too shall pass, that we will get through this. This may be the most devastating thing, certainly not for everyone. Many people have gone through catastrophes. Certainly for some young people, this is the most dramatic change that they've ever been involved in. But we've got more strength than we give ourselves credit for, and finding that inner, just that cellular and spiritual connection to something greater than ourselves is what pulls us forward. And
Rabbi, I know you have a thought.
Well, that was the last thing you said, Libby, that connection with something greater than ourselves. In the 12-step recovery programs, that's right at the beginning. Recognize there's something greater than yourself, because if I'm all there is, then I'm going to be isolated, I'm going to be lonely, and I'm never going to have a sense of genuine fulfillment, because I'll always be aware that I'm falling short of my potential. I could be doing more, I could be better connected, I could be making more of a difference. But when I'm part of something greater than myself, then that gives me purpose, that gives me meaning, that gives me a feeling of eternity, that whatever life is, eventually it ends. And now I'm going to live on through the connections that I've made, through the contributions that I've made. And that's ultimately the source of happiness. That sense that I'm contributing to something more than just me.
And it shifts our focus. We stop thinking about what I don't have or what I can't do or what's happened to me, to a much more global perspective, which is sometimes can be so overwhelming, because suddenly it's, how do I make a difference in all these problems in our country and the world? But it's also this sense of, hey, it's not just about me. There's a much greater good. There are things we can do. And I always find I default to action. when I feel, and that's just my nature, and as an executive coach, that's a lot of what I do, is get people to move forward. And sometimes the inner catches up with the outer. When you go ahead and say, I'm going to make that step, I'm going to take that risk, the rest of you will catch up with that. Sometimes it's the other way around. You have to do that inner work before you can move forward. But if you're sort of working on those two levels, I think that's what pulls us out of this deep sort of malaise of, oh my God, the world has, it's fallen apart. And we have those moments at the beginning of COVID. I had an absolute meltdown. Everything I felt I built for the last 20 years, like many people, it disappeared. And I do a lot of corporate speaking, and the calendar was wiped out in a day. And, I had my panic moment, and then I just got over it. And in fact, this is how I met Yonason. I thought, well, what do I do? I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And I opened up a coaching group and said, come on in, anybody. It's free. It's every Wednesday. And I don't know where we connected, but there was our Rabbi Yonason, who became this, as you've said, it's this font of wisdom for us. And it was such a shining light for everybody who was at first just grief and horror stricken by what their lives had become, and slowly began to pivot and change and see new options, and people really connected and came together.
Yeah, that really was it really was delightful. I don't remember how I ended up hearing about you or what you were doing, but I just remember seeing this notification, whether it was on email or on Facebook or somewhere, that says, I'm starting a group.
Yeah.
And, when you talk about taking action, I mean, I know I'm prone to this, of overthinking and over planning, and I want everything to be perfect. I want to know exactly what I'm doing because I don't want anything to go wrong. And then by the time I'm ready to go, it's already, the moment's passed, and the opportunity is somewhere lost behind me. But it really was a wonderful opportunity. I saw this opportunity. I said, I jumped, took it, and we had this beautiful community that we had going that sustained us all through the whole, challenges of adapting to a world that none of us ever expected.
It was a pretty magical little bubble there. I thought it would last a month or two, and we'd say, well, what's happening in Trinidad? What's happening in Australia? What's happening in Canada? What's happening in Ohio? And people were jumping in, and we stayed together to the end of the year. So it was, to me, that's both the sense of community, and also there's a level of accountability, that you're respectful of other people's time. And when you come forward and say, I'm going to do this, I've made my commitment to myself and the group, and nobody's making you do it. But there's something about that when you make that commitment aloud and in company of others. People would show up and say, hey, I tried it, or I did it, or I moved forward on this. And I'm a big believer in that group dynamic. I think that holds people accountable. It makes them braver than they are on their own, and gets them to try new things and hear new perspectives.
Well, I think it's wonderful. You're quite a leader. You certainly walk the walk, and you didn't expect anything back. That's, I've listened to your stuff for years now. I heard about you from the military. I work with the military a lot, and one of the chaplains was talking about hopes that, as a psychologist, I deal with suicide and suicide awareness and prevention, and your name came up. And so I started researching you years ago. And one of my favorites is your idea that leadership bubbles up. Could you speak to that? Because you certainly bubbled up, and so did the rabbi. Tell us about leadership bubbling up.
Leadership is a self-identification. It's not a title, it's not an office, it's not your salary, it's not any of those things. It's a decision that we can make at any stage of life to say, I'm going to step up and fill a need that I see, or go beyond the description of my job as it's written. I'm going to step up and help others and take over when it's necessary, or I see a void. And as leaders, and the book that I just wrote with Rice University called Leadership Reckoning is very much about that, seeing that students can identify as leaders. They don't have to be leaders already, but it's this willingness to learn and develop and grow. And it was really interesting. I did a lot of interviews with the students there who were going through this leader development program. And many of them thought that leadership, when they came in, it was, it's the aggressive one, it's the extroverted ones, it's the people that talk a lot. And those can be leaders, but they quickly discovered that it was about their own definition of leadership, to which you later apply skills. But it's that self-awareness, it's the empathy, it's the communication, it's the extending your hand to help others. That's, and I always tell people I'm coaching, the leaders, you work for them. It's the other way around. They don't work for you, you work for them. And when you can get that through your head, then you've got a team that's willing to go forward together.
This is so powerful.
That is powerful.
I quote or cite Simon Sinek because he talks to Navy SEALs and he asked them, who are the ones who succeed when you have a bunch of guys come in and they're going through their training? Who are the ones who make it? And he was told it's not the big tough ones. It's not the guys who think I can do it all on my own. It's the guys who, when they're absolutely miserable, they turn to the person next to them and look, how can I help this person? And I found that so powerful because Viktor Frankl says exactly the same thing about the Holocaust, that the people who made it through those death camps, I mean, we're talking horrors that we can't even begin to imagine. How did they make it through? They looked for ways to help others. And that's the key to survival, which is really counterintuitive, but extraordinarily powerful.
And I cite Dr. Frankl all the time as well, because in exactly what you're saying, in the midst of the worst possible scenario, maybe in the history of time, he looked at what helped people survive. And he had this amazing passage about seeing himself standing in front of 1,000 people, explaining what he had gone through and the power of serving others. And then that's exactly what happened. And he didn't want to put his name on the book. He felt like, this is for the world, it's not for my benefit. And people said, no, you have to claim this. We need you to say, this was me, I'm a real person. And so he did. And look at how that has lived on and influenced so many people with just the power and also the simplicity of it. Serve others and you can survive. And that really goes back to what this coaching group was. I thought, what's going to nourish me? What's going to get me out of my slump? Well, it's connecting people and seeing if I can provide something to them. And I didn't know if I could, but boy, did it nourish me. And I was just grateful that it helped others as well.
When we were kids, we came to this country as refugees. And so we didn't have the usual nannies and the usual stuff. The structures, even the possessions. So we had a bunch of kids from lots of families coming in. We're all running around. And when we were in trouble or bored, my father would say, good, who can you help?
Oh, nice.
And he'd have us go knock on a different door. And then we'd polish shoes for the old people. We'd pull weeds. We'd help a new mother with laundry. Can't do that in COVID right now. But so we learned not to say that we were bored.
Right. Or
we're going to be put to work. But it's a good lesson. So let's talk about this hopefulness. I talk with lots of people who are struggling with their mission in life. And they seem to borrow someone else's mission. And of course, they're going to fail because it's not their true mission. Is it possible that everyone can be a leader and everyone can be hopeful?
I think it's possible. I don't know that it's probable. I think there are some people, and that's the journey of life, is finding not only our purpose on the planet, but that hopefulness is that willingness to move ahead. And I think there are some people that may not learn that in this go round. They may not learn it in this lifetime. And that's a misfortune. And I think that's something we can work on it. And like you, I'm not a therapist, but I'm on the board of the mental health services in Los Angeles, the D.D. Hirsch Center, which was the founder of the first suicide prevention center in the country. And I've been involved in that world of mental health for a very long time, having grown up with suicide in the family and a schizophrenic brother. And so being steeped in that world, you see people that I don't know if there's a way for him out of that hopelessness. And that's what we're dealing with at the depth of it.
We're all sorry for your loss. At the same time, I also know that you have helped so many people because of that experience. And I think it's amazing what you're doing. Well,
And that's really
what-
a way of looking, of sort of reframing the whole concept of hope, that when I'm going through the worst of times, somebody says that humor is pain plus time.
Yeah, right.
And, we tell stories and we laugh about absolutely miserable experiences. And then we use those experiences to help others going through their experiences or preparing to go through those experiences. And so when we're in the depths of darkness, the light at the end of the tunnel is the sense that, okay, this is miserable, but I know that ultimately something good will come from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be able to benefit others and be benefited for having gone through it. The question is if we really believe that or not. I wanted to ask you, I read recently someone made a distinction between hope and optimism. Do you see a difference there?
Definitely. Hope, optimism, and then of course there's happiness. I consider them all sort of emotional cousins, but optimism is a generalized sense of everything's going to turn out all right. Maybe true, may not be true, but I'm an optimist. It's the half full versus the half empty. Hope is tied to specific actions and outcomes. So hope is situational and specific. I hope that my work will get better, and therefore I am doing these things to improve that situation. So it's not a generalized sense, which is okay, but it is very specific, and it's linking belief to behavior. If this is the outcome I want, this is what I'm willing to do to get there. And there were a couple of books that really influenced my thoughts and my writing about hope. And one is a book by a doctor who's a Harvard-trained oncologist named Dr. Jerome Groopman. He wrote a book that I loved I read it often, called The Anatomy of Hope. And he found early in his career as a clinician, he was giving cancer diagnoses to patients and their families. And at first he thought, well, I've got to tell them everything there is, which, as you can imagine, is a lot of information. And then he saw that patients were withdrawing from the process. They were so overwhelmed, they could not participate in their own healing process. And so he backed off and went the other way and overcorrected and began to give very little information. And he saw he was creating this sort of false sense of security. Everything's going to be okay, when that may not have been the case. And he found this spot right in the middle that he called true hope. And that was the spot where you gave the reality of the situation without robbing someone of the possible positive outcome. And he said, I'm not God. I've seen people survive who never should have. And I've seen people who succumb to an illness that you would have thought would be easy to treat or get past. So I loved that idea of true hope. And it's seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you see how hard something's going to be. And in the business world, it's telling your team, look, we don't know what's going to happen in the next year, but here's how we're going to address it and try to mitigate what's happening in our world. And then you adjust and you communicate that as you go along. And that to me is true hope.
That reminds me of in Jim Collins' book, Get Good to Great, he talks about what he calls the Stockdale paradox, which is named for this admiral who had been a prisoner of war and who had found the method, very close to what you're describing, of helping his men survive in that horror, which was, if I remember the way he phrases it, he says, have absolute conviction that you will succeed while confronting the brutal facts on the ground.
Yeah.
Because the people who had this irrational says, well, we'll be out of here by Christmas, by such and such a date, says, no, we won't. Deal with it. But that doesn't mean that ultimately we won't prevail. And that's really why I was excited to have you join us, because I think that hope is essential to living an ethical life. Because if we don't have a sense that we can be better, that we can make things better, that we can see progress in a positive way, then it's like, what's the point? I'll become a cynic. I'll give up. Every dog eat dog, law of the jungle, grab what you can. There has to be this feeling that I am contributing to making the world better and making myself better. And ultimately, that's what holds me accountable to set ethical standards.
Mhm.
That was well said, Rabbi.
That's right.
Libby, I saw you presenting a long, long time ago to a university group. And you said something that I thought was very helpful, that you had the secret sauce to success of what I remembered you saying. I'm not sure if that was accurate or not, but that's my memory. And you had a simple 3 steps. If you wouldn't mind sharing that, because hope by itself sometimes doesn't help people feel important enough that they're doing something productive with their action, right? Everyone is clearly important enough, but what's the 3-step process, please?
It's actually 4 steps now.
Oh, it's 4-step. There's my memory.
No,
All right.
it was 3 steps. I've added, in the evolution as we all go.
All right.
And we overcomplicate everything. And in such a complex world, I feel the more we can simplify it down or distill it to a pure essence, we've got a shot. So it's first clarify the vision. And if the vision of your life is too much, then where do you want to be at the end of the year? If you can just be clear on that. And during COVID, it was, where do you want to be in 90 days? That's as far out as many people could see, but get clear on the vision. Then simplify the pathway. What do you need to do to sort of clear the rubble out of the way, bring in the resources, the tools, the people that you need to accelerate your own path, to move forward. Then it's execute. You've got to do it. You've got to stop thinking, start moving. And then finally, the last step I added, and because I see so many people in the business world that forget this, is to stop and review, reflect, and refine. So after anything, a phone call, a meeting, a Zoom call, take a moment, or a huge product rollout or a launch or whatever, big or small, step back. And if you have to put time on your calendar to do this, put it on your calendar to say, how'd we do? How'd that go? What could we do differently? What could be better next time? And then make those course corrections, whether they're giant or just little details, so that you're constantly in the manufacturing world. It's called Kaizen, incremental improvement. If you're improving 1%, 0.5% along the way, you are trending in the right direction.
See, and I remember that, and I like the 4th one. I thought that was very good. But sometimes my clarity is not so clear. What do we do then?
You got to go inside, and I'm sure the rabbi has much more wisdom than I do on this, but however you find that silence, meditation, walk in the nature, music, prayer, whatever you do, and a lot of people give lip service to this, but a daily practice, and Rabbi, you weigh in on this, but some kind of daily practice, I think, is the only way to tune into that voice.
I agree. Rabbi?
It's interesting. I was just thinking about this the other day, that when I started speaking, I guess almost 5 years ago, one of the first people I was introduced to, I'm not even sure I remember his name, but he generously gave me time on the phone. And one of the things he said, that maybe the one thing that really stuck with me, he said he sets aside half an hour a day to think.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said about meditation, you said about prayer, study, our minds are so overloaded these days.
Right.
And there's a point at which we're just spinning our wheels. And we're not thinking clearly, we're not thinking effectively, we're not interaction, we're not making good choices. We need to slow down. And science has proven the benefits of meditation. Mm-hmm. In just a few minutes a day, to stop, to focus on my breathing. I mean, I put on a recording on Spotify of nature sounds. Mm-hmm. Because I can't always get out into nature. And apparently the sounds of nature are beneficial for our minds, that random sounds of wind blowing through the leaves and water flowing and insects chirping and that type of stuff, that rhythmic sounds of the urban world get us into this repetitive pattern, which really is not healthy for us to be in without a break. And so setting aside time to really withdraw, I think it was JP Morgan who said, I can do a year's work in 9 months, but not in 12 months.
Ah, that's funny.
Right? If I don't get a break from my work, I won't work well.
Yeah.
And that's another way of thinking about it. I remember I still have this problem. I sit down to meditate and I feel like, gosh, I'm wasting time I could be using for something productive. Whereas if I see it as preparation, Stephen Covey's rule, sharpen your axe. If I'm banging away with a dull axe, it's going to take me 3 times as long to cut down the tree. If I'm working with a dull mind, it's going to take me a lot longer to get things done, and they won't get done as well.
Right.
And we have a comment from Dr. Jenny Kalishman-Druxman, or a question. Wasn't God smart when he created the Sabbath or Shabbos?
Yeah.
Well, presumably God was smart, or we'll
That's
take that for
funny.
granted. But it is true. The same idea, and a lot of people today, I don't know about a lot, but there is a movement, regardless of religion, people taking a technology Sabbath. 1 day a week, no devices. And people think, well, how could you possibly survive without checking your email, without making phone calls? And guess what? It can be really quite liberating.
Right. Yeah.
So Libby, you've been helping people all around the planet. How did you get to this place?
Oh gosh, what a question.
Well, thanks.
Yes, it really is that lifetime journey. I mean, I grew up in a very chaotic and household. There was a lot of shame. There was a lot of, the drama was all around my parents and multiple step parents all the time. So I learned to keep to myself and keep my mouth shut, and what I had to say really didn't matter. And it took many years to get past that. And I found my first career in public relations where I was making everybody else smart and everybody else sound great, and I was like behind the scenes and completely silent, until after enough years of that, I thought, well, gosh, maybe I do have something to say. And I wrote my first book, and then I wrote another one, and now I'm on to the 6th one. And along the way, I thought, oh, what I love is, there's so many people that say, I love to help others, and it's almost a cliche. But what I found that I loved in the business world, and that's what sort of turned me around, was that I could help these young people become leaders. I turned these kids into real executives. And it was such a wonderful process. And people would say, well, what was your best memory of being a leader? And it was so easy. The best memory was my first real assistant had cancer, and it was a very serious form of cancer. And my team just huddled around, we circled the wagons around this young woman for over a year, and she did recover. And it was my proudest moment. I thought the fact that this didn't get out except to HR and my boss, and that we held her job for her, was the proudest moment. I thought there's nothing more honorable you can do in the workplace than help other people survive, and beyond that to thrive in both their careers and their personal lives. And the more I did that, the more I saw that's my mission. And then decided to take it to another form, which was starting my own business, doing what I loved, coaching other people and helping other people grow, and then finding the various forms of that. And that made me see that, in fact, you know what? Sometimes I joke and I'll say this, it's like, damn, I'm good. I have that moment, and I tell other people, you got to remind yourself that, damn, you're good, that you've got to have that, because we deal with insecurity and self-confidence issues, and everybody does. It doesn't matter how high up the ladder they are. There are those moments of, oh my gosh, what do I do here? But finding that you have served and you will continue to serve that's enough. I feel like I don't have anything to prove. I don't have anything I have to do. And I'm at the point in life, and it's maturity and age, where I feel like I can do what feels like it's purposeful and still have time for fun and family. My calendar is blocked out Friday afternoon for fun and family. Good. Nobody could put a meeting there, and that is sacrosanct to me.
Well, and that shows in your face and in your voice and your posture. I think loving ourselves, the way our original families would have if they could have, right?
Right.
And you're doing that now with your family. I am glad that you found your voice. And I know that from chaos, you went to clarity. Now you're helping everyone. What's next for you?
Oh gosh, I just become more refined in the people that I serve and that I have in the business world in particular, but I've always got that sense of the personal life must be factored in. It's not all business, or why do it? So I set this mission a while ago, and I think Jonason's probably heard me say, I jokingly will say that I attract and I love to work with smart women and enlightened men. And I finally made that my mission statement, that I want to serve, and just in this year, 1,000 women and heart-centered men, enlightened men. There's a group of men that don't want to work with me, and that's okay. They'll find, their right path. And once I said that, it was funny because one day I looked up, I've got a whiteboard with all my clients and reminders. I looked up and said, what do you know? It's all women, except for a couple of enlightened men who I love working with. So that's sort of where I'm going in different membership groups and in my coaching, and it's a great joy.
Well, I'm just so happy for you and for all of us. It's we all benefit when someone finds their secret sauce.
Thank you.
And Yonason, I'm glad you're one of those enlightened men that that connected with her. Good for you. Good for us that we found you.
You know, what's so compelling about your message, and it's important for us to remember that not all of us, I'm talking about the universal us, are in positions where it's immediately evident that we have the opportunity to influence, that we have the opportunity to serve. But you think about it, I mean, we talk about the service industry. I mean, when I was a kid, my first job was scooping ice cream.
Me too.
Mine was shining shoes. When I was
Baskin Robbins on San Vicente Boulevard. Is it still there?
Maybe. It's probably turned into a gelato place by now. But.
Yeah. But my experience behind the counter was determined by the kind of customer that I had. And I still remember, one day a customer came in and he was grumpy from the moment he started giving me his order. And he asked for a soda, and I misheard him, and I made him a milkshake. And boy, was he put off. And the moment I finished with him, the next person in line gave me his order. He said, you know what? You're doing a great job. Take your time, do what you need to do. And, that person changed my whole frame of mind for the rest of the day.
Of course.
With a simple, kind word, a simple gesture.
Mm-hmm.
You walk down the street and you smile at people, you make eye contact, you say good morning. Sometimes you'll scare the daylights out of them, but more often, they'll smile back, they'll say hello. Maybe they'll smile at the next person they see.
Well,
there's
with
so
masks,
many ways.
Smile with your eyes, right?
Yeah, well, the mask is a little more complicated, but if
does.
you're walking down the streets of Manhattan, obviously you can't say hello to every person. There's so many ways to influence other people with very little investment of time or effort to make a huge difference.
Little kids get it right. When you ask children, what do you do to make the world a better place? They'll say, I smile and make people happy. Or I make a drawing for them, or I give them a hug and a kiss. They get it. I mean, and as we get older, we think somehow that that's not enough, just making one person smile or connecting. But as the good rabbi was saying, it made all the difference. So that's kind of interesting. Oh my goodness. Well, I have a challenge.
We have a question
for everybody
here in the
then.
chat.
Oh, what?
We have a question in the chat for Libby.
No, I have a challenge first.
Okay.
That'll be part of that. And actually, Dr. Jenny Kalishman-Druxman, her question helped inspired my challenge. Here's the challenge. What can you do or have you done today, tomorrow, the next day, that is that special something for somebody else? What are you doing to make the world a better place for one other person is what I can ask. All right. So Rabbi, you want to go ahead and read her question then?
Yeah. So this is also from Dr. Jenny. Libby, what do you do to protect yourself from negative influences that you cannot necessarily extricate yourself from?
AKA family, work, neighbors,
Yes.
children.
I tend to, in my head, sort of label, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but I identify who are my, you can call them anything, energy vampires, whatever, but I think of them as limiters and liberators. They're a group of people who are the limiters that you know are going to suck your lifeblood out of you and leave you exhausted. And we tend to know who they are. And we feel guilty if we don't let them into our lives. So I say, manage your time. If that's your, pick your uncle or your relative or whomever who wants to come stay with you for a month or a week. Maybe you say, how about overnight? You control and manage the time and be aware of what you're giving up in terms of energy, time, all of that. And then there are people who are the liberators, who are there just to, the people like the fellow that smiled at you, Yonason, the people that are just set your dreams free, that make you think you can do anything. Seek them out, spend time with them so that you consciously are, I know what this person wants. I'm going to spend 5 minutes on the phone. I'm not going to spend 2 hours on a Zoom call. And control and manage that. We've only got so much time and so much energy to give. So those of us who are in healing or giving or sharing professions, or by nature, you got to, fill up the tank. You got to take care of yourself as well. So that's how I do it.
I think that's great. And I want to remind everyone of the rule that I've shared repeatedly. Don't let the devil in the door. If someone doesn't bless your life and make you better, don't invite them home. Meet them at a park, meet them somewhere else. Nowadays, restaurants and stuff are challenging, but don't get stuck in a car with them. Set some limits. You can be very loving with people if you're not stuck with them, and you can set limits. We all have that one relative that goes on and on about all the horrible things in life. And I say 5 minutes. I'll listen for 5 minutes. At the end of 5 minutes, okay, now tell me about your garden.
Yeah.
Set a limit, and limit setting can be positive. We often get angry and grumpy at people who are impinging on us. Well, that's just where they are. We don't have to allow it now, do we? So what are your favorite, I call those polite shut-ups. What are your favorite limit settings or polite shut-ups, the two of you? Libby?
Well, first is setting the expectation up front.
Yes.
That it's, do you want to do an outdoor lunch, or gee, I just don't have time. Let's do a quick phone call and check in. Shift the conversation, set your own limit. So yeah, polite shut up, and don't be afraid to frame it that way. Just not as a polite shut up, but frame it in terms of the limitation. You just can't do it all. You can't take all of those in. So for me, it's anticipating it and not feel the need to answer everybody immediately. Weigh it over and see what your energy says about whether you want to do that or you want to put a stop to it.
Rabbi, your favorite polite shut up?
That's probably something I'm still working on. But, in Judaism, we have a concept of evil speech. And it technically refers to gossip, which is maybe true, and that's how people justify it, but it's true. Yeah, but what's the benefit of saying it? But then colloquially, it extends to any kind of pointlessly negative speech. And there is something, I remember learning in high school, Benjamin Franklin said he always expects the worst, and that way he's constantly delighted that things don't turn out as bad. I haven't really, I see from Libby's expression, she's not quite on board with that, and neither am I. There is something to be said for limiting expectations, right? Because unmet expectations can be the root of much evil, but at the same time to have a positive outlook. But it's so easy. I mean, especially politics. I mean, my mother, she should be well. She's 92 years old, and she listens to the news way too much. And she's always bemoaning the fate of the country. Say, okay, let her go on for a few minutes. And then, as you say, let's shift on to, let's talk about your grandchildren. Let's talk about the things that are good in life. It's really just a question of reframing, of looking at the positive. You know, there's a famous story that after the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, so four of the sages were walking and they came over the Mount of Olives and they looked down on the place where the temple had stood and they saw the ruins of the temple, which had been destroyed in their lifetime. And while they were watching, they saw the place, the Holy of Holies, the most sanctified place on the face of the earth. They saw a fox run into it. And three of them started to weep. And they said, this is the place where the high priest used to stand on the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, and atone for and now it's a place for foxes. And the fourth one, Rabbi Akiva, he started to laugh. And they said, why are you laughing? And he said, why are you crying? Well, they explained, what greater tragedy could there be than this? Why are you laughing? He said, the prophet says that the place of the temple would one day be destroyed and overrun by wild animals. But the prophet also said that the temple will be rebuilt and all the Jews will come back to live in their homeland. If the first prophecy has been fulfilled, then how much closer are we to the fulfillment of the second?
That's great.
Well, that's lovely.
Being able to find the hope in tragedy, to be able to find the good in the bad, to turn the negative into positive. You know, it requires some creativity, requires some effort, some discipline, but the rewards are priceless.
Yes.
I think that's wonderful. And it's kind of like some people have this gallery of complaints and they'll tell you this and then that and then this and then that. And it's so funny. And I laugh. So Rabbi, she should be well. Is that like the Southern saying, bless her heart? Is that the saying?
I know that one.
Bless her heart. And I think the gallery of complaints should be that temple that eventually no longer can be worshiped in, and then the wild animals come in and you can do a do-over, right? I think all of us can choose hope and we can choose positivity. There is somebody always in our lives that's going to say all the negative things, and they go on and on and on. One of my best friends, I call him a curmudgeon. And I go, oh, my little curmudgeon. So how's your garden? And he knows that that's my polite shut up, meaning next.
Yeah.
You know, my wife says, you know, isn't the weather nice today?
I'll sometimes ask people, what was the best thing about 2020?
So what was the best thing for you?
I think quiet time and reflection. I wasn't getting on airplanes, so that just a little slowdown was, and I've only been married for 2.5 years.
Oh, congratulations!
Thank you, and becoming that much closer to my newish spouse and being very happily locked down together was.
I'm so glad that you had your little honeymoon time, unexpected.
Exactly.
What a blessing. Rabbi, what was your best part about 2020?
Well, I met both of you.
You got a little something on your nose. Okay, so
among many others.
I have to say, I've
made so many valuable connections with people that I never would have come in contact with. They live all over the country and sometimes all over the world.
Yes.
I mean, I was on a call yesterday with a woman in South Africa who started commenting on my posts, and you know, we had a lovely conversation. And another woman on the East Coast. There's just so much opportunity now to connect with people that can really bring a tremendous amount of value into our lives, and we can bring value into theirs.
Yes, there are no more borders. You know, the only difficulty is the people who do not have technology or don't know how to use it. And once we take care of that disparity, I think everything's open to everyone, which is lovely, you know.
That actually leads into the word of the day.
Aha, Rabbi.
Which is serendipity. Right? Serendipity is not just encounters with things that are good or hopeful or joyful, but there's that element of the unexpected.
Mhm.
And that very often it's not looking for something that is extraordinary. It's just paying attention. You know, if you ever look at the work of really good photographers, it's not always Ansel Adams going out into the uncharted land of Yosemite. It's the ability to frame the ordinary that gets us to notice it in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise. And so serendipity is all around us. If we keep our eyes open, we pay attention, and we look for those moments that can bring us inspiration. This one quick story, a rabbi in the 1950s took his first trip on a jet airplane. And he came back and he met with his rabbi, and he said, it was so inspiring. I was looking out the window. I saw the curvature of the earth. I saw the sun setting and the vastness of space. I truly felt that I saw the presence of God. And his rabbi said, I know exactly what you mean. I feel the same thing every time I see a daisy. It's one of my favorite stories, because
And
you
you know,
don't
my
have
name
to
is
go to the
my
edge
name is
of
a daisy.
space.
Yeah.
It's right there in front of us.
That's wonderful, Rabbi. That is a great story. Well, I feel it has been serendipitous for us all to have time, because normally all of us would be on airplanes going all over the world speaking. And here we had a chance to catch the likes of a Libby Gill, and from Disney to Dr. Phil to all of us. And we're incredibly honored and delighted.
Thank you very much.
Well, so how can we help you? That's the other question the Rabbi and I always ask. I mean, we know you have a mission. What can we do to help you with your mission?
Oh gosh, that was unexpected and I'm very grateful. I think you send people who think that I may be able to help them in some way to my website, libbygill.com, or LinkedIn, and maybe I've got a piece of content that could help them, or maybe they want to connect, and that would help me and hopefully help them as well.
So how many women do you have now? How many women are you short?
You know, I can't exactly quantify, but I think I'm up to about 430-ish. So I've got till the end of the year. I'm about halfway there.
Oh, you're doing super well. Well, we will send women your way for sure.
Okay.
And enlighten men.
Absolutely. I've anyone in the chat, I've been putting links to your book, to the books you recommended, your LinkedIn, your website. When we put this on Buzzsprout for audio podcast and on Vimeo and YouTube, we'll make sure we put all the links in that as well. Is there a last bit of advice that you would give to our faithful audience? We have a mighty and thoughtful audience for whom we're grateful, and to whom.
Well, you said it already, and it is what I often say and sign books with, and that is choose hope.
Choose hope and happiness. Because you linked them before, but choose hope. I think that's, we're delighted that you have chosen hope and that you shared it with us. So anyone who's here, do you have a last question for her? We've got her here. She's ours. You got a last comment or question? My daughter, who's listening for the other room, just said, no comment, just wow.
Oh, that's very kind.
And astute.
And it's worth mentioning as well that our own Dr. Redshoe has a website with much valuable information and content there that's definitely worth visiting. So
let me put both of our LinkedIn. We are learning to share that. We didn't think to do it at first because we were just trying to share the word, but we thought, boy, we're not telling people how to reach us. Right. It's funny the things you don't think to do when you think you're so excited about doing something else. You know, there are people who are naturally inclined to sales, and there are people who are not terribly excited by the prospect of selling or like selling themselves. And, you know, it's something that in business we have to learn, that if we want to serve people,
we have to let them know who we are and
Exactly.
what we offer and how to find us.
Well,
And-
Libby Gill did it, and she's leading through change and challenge. I see that that's on your website. And I think that may your message become globally viral, as I think that it's a good time. We started this podcast because we thought America could do better with how they think and how they process and have discussions and how they behave. And I had to have the rabbi because I love his stories, and he's such a steady, measured soul. And then we decided to invite guests because why not? Let's learn from what the bounty that everyone has to offer. And I think you've made a huge impact today, and we're grateful to you. I would have never thought of inviting you because you're such a big name, but the rabbi says, I know her. It's okay. Let's do it. So thank you.
You're very kind, both of you. I appreciate being here. And it was such a wonderful, thoughtful conversation. What a pleasure in the day to talk about something of substance.
Well, and let's do it again, please. And when you have something else that you want to share with us, please let us know. We'll have you in a New York minute.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anytime. And please do remember, off script, if there's something we can do to help you with your mission. If you have something you want us to spread, if you need anyone to give you input on anything, we'd be delighted. We would love to be of service in your hope quest.
Lovely. Thank you. I will remember that and take you up on that.
All right, Rabbi, you want to do the last los despedidas, the goodbyes?
Das Vidania, how's that? When the greatest friendship in the Bible is David and Jonathan. And I often think the most Jewish thing my parents did for me is naming me Jonathan David. So I have an affinity towards the story. But when they took leave from one another, they used the phrase Lech Shalom, which is usually translated as go in peace. But that's not a correct translation. It really is translated go toward peace. Because this world is not a peaceful world. We don't live peaceful lives. We live lives of tension and lives of struggle, because that's what growth is. And we're always meant to be growing. But if we have that sense that everything is leading us towards a peaceful, and the truth is that even peace is not a good translation of shalom. A better translation is harmony. When everything is in place, when everything works together, when all the moving parts are in concert, that's what harmony is. So having the sense that my struggle is leading me towards harmony, I think is the way of leading a hopeful life and leading a happy life.
All right. So go forth, everyone, and do what you can do to up your levels of hope and be there for others. I know you'll be happy that you did. We'll see you all next week. And Libby, again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.